Your kind always tries to steal from us. The accusation sliced through Hamilton Federal's marble hall. Rebecca Sullivan snatched the $75,000 check from Eleanor Mitchell's weathered hands. Hands that had taught thousands, hands that now trembled with her daughter's cancer diagnosis. The tearing echoed like a gunshot. Once, twice, 8 pieces drifted to the floor. "Fraud in progress!" Rebecca screamed. "Security, now!" Phones erupted. Live streams blazed. 10K viewers, 100K, viral in seconds. Eleanor didn't move. Her late husband's watch ticked against the silence. The same watch he'd worn when this bank denied him 35 years ago. "Your kind belongs at the check-cashing place down the street." Brad Thompson materialized, reeking of cologne and condescension. Eleanor's fingers found her phone. One text. "They did it again, son." The security footage wouldn't just capture assault. It would capture the moment before Hamilton Federal's CEO discovered what they'd done to his mother. The timestamp that would destroy careers. Eleanor Mitchell's morning had begun like any other in her modest Baltimore home, sunlight filtering through lace curtains onto a kitchen table covered in medical bills. The coffee percolated steadily as she arranged the papers into neat piles. Oncology consultations, chemotherapy schedules, insurance denials. Each document represented another battle in her daughter Angela's war against breast cancer. The photo on the mantel caught her eye. Her son Marcus in an expensive suit at some corporate event, his smile confident, but eyes carrying that same wariness she'd taught him. "Always document everything," she whispered to the photo, touching the frame gently. "Your father learned that the hard way." But the man in the photo was already making plans. In the drawer beneath lay a yellowed complaint form from 1987, racial discrimination at Hamilton Federal Bank. Her husband James had filed it after being denied a business loan despite perfect credit. Nothing had come of it then. The complaint would matter in 3 hours, though Eleanor didn't know it yet. The phone rang. Angela's voice, tired but trying to sound strong. "Mom, you don't have to do this. We'll find another way." "Baby, that treatment starts next week. Insurance denied the claim again." Eleanor kept her voice steady. "Your father's retirement account is just sitting there. $75,000 will cover everything." "But it's all you have left of Dad. He'd want his grandbabies to have their mother." Eleanor touched his watch on her wrist, drawing strength from its weight. "I have an appointment at Hamilton Federal at 3. Someone else picked up the extension silently. After hanging up, Eleanor dressed carefully. Navy blue dress, the color of authority. Pearl earrings, low heels. The outfit of someone who belonged in marble banking halls. She'd learned long ago that armor came in many forms. She placed the account documents in her leather folder, a gift from Marcus last Christmas. The folder smelled of expensive leather and promise. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Heard you're going to the bank today. Call if you need anything." She smiled, not knowing his secretary had already cleared his afternoon. The drive to Hamilton Federal took 20 minutes. The building rose like a monument to old money, limestone and glass, brass fixtures, the kind of place that whispered tradition and exclusivity. Eleanor had been here once before, 35 years ago, sitting beside James as they were denied that loan. Different decade, same marble, same message. The security system logged her entry twice, once at the door, once at the teller area. 3 employees noticed her name on the appointment screen. Rebecca Sullivan, reviewing her morning fraud alerts, saw Eleanor Mitchell scheduled for a large withdrawal. Her supervisor, Brad Thompson, had just reminded her about the quarterly bonus tied to fraud prevention. Rebecca's mortgage was overdue. Her daughter needed braces. Her ex-husband had stopped sending child support. "High-value withdrawal coming in," Brad messaged Rebecca via the internal system. "You know what to do. Document everything." Rebecca glanced at the photo of her kids on her desk, then at her fraud prevention metrics. She was 2 catches away from her bonus. The algorithm had flagged several accounts that morning, all belonging to elderly customers, particularly those with ethnic names. It was just pattern recognition. She told herself. Statistics, not prejudice. Eleanor approached the teller window, her footsteps steady on the marble. She didn't notice how Rebecca's expression shifted upon seeing her, the slight narrowing of eyes, the unconscious straightening of shoulders, the hand moving toward the security button. "Good afternoon," Eleanor said, placing her documents on the counter. "I have an appointment for a withdrawal." Rebecca's quota deadline was in 2 hours. The other customers continued their business, unaware they were about to witness history. Jaden Williams, a young entrepreneur, was depositing his first big check from a client, live streaming his day in the life for his followers. Mrs. Hampton Wells, socialite and Harvard alumni board member, was arranging a wire transfer. Tony Chen counted the day's deposits from his restaurant. They would all remember this moment differently. But they would all remember it. The security camera above captured everything in silent testimony. In 90 minutes, its footage would be evidence. But right now, it was just another Tuesday at Hamilton Federal Bank. 3 employees recognized her name immediately. Rebecca Sullivan's fingers drummed against the marble counter as she examined Eleanor's identification with theatrical scrutiny. The Connecticut driver's license was perfectly valid. The second form of ID, a passport, lay untouched. The withdrawal slip for $75,000 sat between them like a battle line. "This is quite a large amount, Mrs. Mitchell." Rebecca's tone carried that particular inflection reserved for suspected criminals. She held the license up to the light unnecessarily, angling it back and forth. "I'll need to verify some information." Eleanor maintained her composure, though her husband's watch felt heavier on her wrist. "Of course. I called ahead. Everything should be in order. People call ahead all the time." Rebecca's supervisor, Brad Thompson, watched from his corner office, giving her an encouraging nod. "That doesn't mean the funds are legitimate. You understand, we have to protect our customers from fraud." The words hung in the air. Several customers glanced over. "I am your customer," Eleanor said quietly. "For 35 years. Rebecca typed slowly, deliberately, making Eleanor wait. Each keystroke was performed with unnecessary force. "I show an Eleanor Mitchell on file, yes, but this account, people like you don't typically have accounts of this size." The phrase landed like a slap. Mrs. Hampton Wells, waiting at the next window, turned sharply. Tony Chen stopped counting bills. "People like me." Eleanor's voice remained steady, though her hands tightened on her purse. "I'd like you to explain exactly what you mean by that." "You know what I mean." Rebecca leaned back, arms crossed. "We see this all the time. Elderly people, especially from certain neighborhoods, suddenly trying to withdraw large amounts. It's usually a scam. Someone's taking advantage of you." Her supervisor watched from his corner office. Jaden Williams had been live streaming his banking experience, but now his camera turned toward the confrontation. "You all seeing this?" he whispered to his phone. His followers began flooding the comments. Eleanor placed her second form of ID on the counter. "Here's my passport, my account statements, a letter from my financial advisor. What else do you need?" "These can all be forged." Rebecca didn't even look at them. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Mom. I know fraud when I see it. My kids depend on me to protect this bank's assets. Your kids depend on you to do your job properly," Eleanor responded, "which includes serving all customers with respect." Rebecca's face flushed. She grabbed the desk phone. "I'm calling security." Eleanor's calmness unsettled everyone. Carl Morrison, the security guard, approached reluctantly. He'd known Eleanor since she taught his nephew at Jefferson High. His hand never touched his radio. Something about this felt wrong, but Brad Thompson was gesturing urgently from his office. "Is there a problem here?" Carl asked, positioning himself diplomatically between both women. "This woman is attempting to withdraw funds that I don't believe are hers," Rebecca announced loudly enough for the growing crowd to hear. "She's probably being scammed, or she's the scammer." A customer recognized Eleanor from church. "That's Mrs. Mitchell," the woman called out. "She taught at Jefferson for 30 years. What are you doing to her?" Rebecca's desperation spiked. Her bonus, her mortgage, her children's stability, it all hinged on her fraud prevention metrics. She grabbed Eleanor's check with both hands. "I'm protecting the real Eleanor Mitchell from theft," she declared. "This is obviously fraudulent." The sound of tearing paper silenced the entire bank. Rebecca ripped the $75,000 check in half, then quarters, then eighths. Each tear was deliberate, vicious. The pieces floated to the marble floor like snow. Jaden's livestream captured every second. The viewer count hit 10,000 and climbing. "Are you seriously doing this right now?" Mrs. Hampton Wells stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of old money and social position. "She showed you 3 forms of identification." "I'm doing my job." Rebecca's voice cracked. "My supervisor supports this decision, don't we, Brad?" Brad Thompson emerged from his office, cologne preceding him like a toxic cloud. His wedding ring was at the pawn shop, but his arrogance remained intact. "Mrs. Mitchell, while I understand you're upset, our tellers are trained to identify potential fraud. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a smaller institution." The sound of tearing paper cost the bank $50 million. Eleanor Mitchell stood perfectly still as the torn pieces of her check settled on the marble floor. She reached into her purse with deliberate calm and pulled out her phone. The small recording device attached to it had been her husband's last gift, a habit from his years fighting discrimination in corporate America. "I want you all to know," Eleanor said, her voice carrying across the silent bank, "that I've been recording this entire interaction. Every single word." Brad Thompson's face drained of color. His wedding ring was at the pawn shop, but his panic was on full display. Rebecca stuttered. "You can't. That's illegal. Not in Maryland. Single-party consent state." Eleanor's teaching voice emerged, the one that had commanded classrooms for 3 decades. "My late husband always said, document everything. He faced this too, 30 years ago, at this very bank." The device had been her husband's last gift. The bank's PR director, watching the live stream from her office downtown, grabbed her emergency phone. The stock price had already started dipping. 3 major clients had called asking for explanations. The board would want blood. Outside, a news van screeched to a stop. Reporter Janet Morrison, Carl the security guard's daughter, had received Jaden's stream from a friend. She ran toward the bank with her cameraman, already composing her lead. Racial discrimination caught on video at Hamilton Federal Bank. The reporter had Marcus's direct number. Inside Brad's office, his computer showed 17 missed calls from corporate. An emergency Slack channel had been created. "Crisis Management, Hamilton Federal." The first message was from the CEO himself, though Brad didn't recognize the significance yet. "Nobody makes any statements. I'm on my way." Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text. "5 minutes, Mum. Let them dig deeper." More customers began sharing their stories, each one building a pattern that Rebecca and Brad could no longer deny. Mrs. Hampton Wells pulled out her phone and called her husband, a senior partner at Baltimore's largest law firm. "David, you need to see what's happening at Hamilton Federal. Bring the discrimination litigation team." Rebecca tried one last defense. "I was protecting the bank. Look at the fraud statistics for this demographic." "Stop." Carl, the security guard, finally spoke up. "Just stop. Mrs. Mitchell taught my nephew Jerome. She tutored him for free when we couldn't afford help. She's been banking here since before you were born, Rebecca. The crowd grew larger. Bank employees from other departments came to watch. The marble hall, designed to intimidate and impress, became a courtroom of public opinion. Eleanor stood at its center, dignified in her navy dress, her husband's watch catching the light. "This isn't just about me," Eleanor said, addressing the crowd and cameras. "It's about every person who's been made to feel less than human in places like this. Every time we're followed in stores, questioned at banks, doubted in our own neighborhoods. Today, it stops here." The elevator to the executive floor suddenly activated. The brass arrow above it began its descent from the 30th floor. Brad watched it with growing dread. Who had called the CEO directly? The caller ID said, "Mom's bank visit." Jaden zoomed in on the elevator display. "Yo, someone big is coming down. This about to get real." Rebecca grabbed her personal items, knowing her career was over. But she paused at the torn check on the floor. Each piece represented not just Eleanor's money, but Rebecca's own moral failure. She'd let fear and pressure transform her into exactly what she'd sworn she'd never become. Someone who judged others by their skin rather than their character. Marcus's empty chair dominated the boardroom. The elevator descended with mechanical precision, 29, 28, 27, each floor marking another second of mounting tension. The entire bank seemed to hold its breath. Brad Thompson frantically typed on his phone, trying to reach legal, trying to reach HR, trying to reach anyone who could contain this disaster before the feds got involved. "We need to contain this before the feds get involved," he actually said aloud, not realizing Jaden's live stream caught every word. The hashtag #BankingWhileBlack had started trending. News outlets picked up Jaden's stream. CNN's breaking news ticker read, "Viral video shows bank teller destroying black customer's check." Fox Business ran with, "Hamilton Federal stock drops 3% amid discrimination allegations." The social media explosion was instant and devastating. "This is a witch hunt!" Rebecca shouted at her colleagues, mascara running. "I followed every protocol in the manual. Look." She pulled up her computer screen, showing the fraud prevention guidelines. "Elderly customers, high-value withdrawals, certain zip codes, it's all here." Her colleague Michelle, a young black woman who'd been silent for 2 years, finally spoke. "Rebecca, do you hear yourself? Those certain zip codes are all predominantly black neighborhoods." The hashtag reached someone unexpected. Outside, protesters had begun gathering. They hadn't been organized. Social media had done that organically. Someone had printed signs already. "Eleanor Mitchell deserves respect," and "Banking while black is not a crime." A local Baptist church's van pulled up, and 20 congregants emerged with practiced precision. They'd done this before, at other banks, other businesses. The movement had found its newest symbol. Eleanor stood like she owned the place. The elevator showed floor 15. Brad's desperation peaked. He turned to Eleanor with what he thought was a conciliatory tone. "Mrs. Mitchell, surely we can resolve this without—" "Without what?" Eleanor's voice cut through his attempted negotiation. "Without accountability? Without change? You watched your employee destroy my property. You supported her discrimination. You suggested I go to a smaller institution. What exactly are you trying to resolve?" Board member Sheila Tran had been having lunch nearby when her assistant showed her the live stream. She abandoned her meal and raced to the bank, arriving just as the crowd outside reached 100 people. As the only black board member in Hamilton Federal's 150-year history, she'd warned them about this exact scenario in 3 different meetings. "Tran had seen this pattern before," she muttered, pushing through the crowd. Tony Chen made a decision. He walked to the teller window next to Rebecca's and announced loudly, "I'm closing my business accounts, all of them. Hamilton Federal has had my restaurant's money for 10 years, not anymore." "I'm closing my accounts too." said the elderly man who'd shared his story earlier. 40 years of banking here. Done. Mrs. Hampton Wells added her voice. The Hampton Wells Foundation will be moving its $12 million endowment elsewhere, immediately. Their closures would inspire thousands. Brad's phone showed a text from the regional VP. Whatever you do, don't let them close accounts on camera. Too late. Jaden was capturing everything, providing commentary like a sports broadcaster. 3 major account closures in real time, folks. This bank is bleeding money live on stream. Floor 10, on the elevator display. Eleanor's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. I'm here, Mum. Stay calm. Let me handle this. His secretary had already cleared his afternoon. The crowd inside the bank had grown to 50 people. Employees from other floors came to witness what everyone sensed was a historic moment. The marble hall, with its vaulted ceilings and brass fixtures, had become an amphitheater of accountability. Rebecca made one last desperate attempt. You don't understand the pressure we're under. My ex-husband stopped child support. My daughter needs braces. I'm about to lose my house. The fraud bonus was my only chance to... So you chose to destroy my chance to save my daughter's life. Eleanor's response was quiet, but devastating. You chose your bonus over my humanity? The elevator held their fate. Floor 5. Carl, the security guard's radio, crackled. His supervisor was asking for a status update. Stand by, Carl responded, then did something unprecedented. He removed his security badge and placed it on the counter. I've worked security here for 8 years. I've seen this happen too many times. I'm done being complicit. Carl's courage inspired hundreds. Brad Thompson's attempts at damage control grew more frantic. He tried to usher Eleanor into his office, away from cameras. She didn't move. He tried to disperse the crowd, citing banking regulations. Nobody listened. His authority, built on institutional power rather than respect, crumbled publicly. Floor 3. Protesters outside began chanting, "Eleanor! Eleanor!" Someone had made a banner in the 15 minutes since the story broke. Local politicians, always alert to viral moments, began arriving. The state senator who chaired the banking committee stepped out of her car, her aide briefing her rapidly on the situation. "This is exactly why we need change," one protester shouted. "How many Eleanors never get justice?" Inside, Rebecca stood frozen as her entire world-view shattered. The manual she'd followed, the training she'd received, the metrics she'd chased, all of it had been designed to discriminate. She'd been a tool of systemic racism, incentivized by bonuses and driven by personal desperation. Her children's photos seemed to judge her from the desk. Floor 2. The entire crowd turned toward the elevator. Even Jaden stopped talking, holding his phone steady. "No one expected the CEO," he would later tell reporters. The elevator doors began to open with a soft mechanical hum. Brad's coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the sudden silence. A man stepped out, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, Italian leather shoes clicking on marble. He moved with purpose, with authority, with barely controlled fury. His CEO badge gleamed. Marcus Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer, Hamilton Federal Bank. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible even outside. Marcus Mitchell stood in the marble hall of his bank, his eyes taking in the scene. Torn check pieces on the floor, his mother standing dignified amid chaos, employees frozen in shock, cameras recording everything. The CEO badge on his chest caught the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. 3 years he'd held this position. 3 years of fighting institutional racism from the inside, and still, this had happened to his own mother. "My God, that's Marcus Mitchell!" Mrs. Hampton Wells gasped. "I was at his Harvard graduation." Marcus had been watching everything. Rebecca Sullivan's legs nearly gave out. The face she'd seen in corporate newsletters, in annual reports, in the portrait hanging in the executive conference room. That face belonged to the son of the woman she'd just humiliated. Her career didn't just end in that moment. It evaporated. The photos of her children on her desk seemed to mock her desperation-driven choices. Marcus walked directly to his mother, his Italian leather shoes crunching on the torn check pieces. He embraced her, and for a moment, his CEO armor cracked. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry this happened in my house." Eleanor held him briefly, then pulled back with the same strength that had carried her through 30 years of teaching in underfunded schools. "Don't apologize. Act." Their embrace would become iconic, a photo that would run in newspapers nationwide, symbolizing both the intimacy of discrimination's pain and the power of vindication. Marcus turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying the authority of his position and the barely controlled rage of a son. "I'm Marcus Mitchell. I've been CEO of Hamilton Federal for 3 years. This is my mother, Eleanor Mitchell. She taught me everything about dignity, about perseverance, about standing tall when the world tries to make you small." Rebecca's career ended in that moment. He pulled out his phone, swiping to an app that showed the bank's security feeds. "I've been watching since this started. Since the moment Ms. Sullivan here accused my mother of fraud. Since Mr. Thompson suggested she'd be more comfortable at a smaller institution." Brad Thompson looked like he might vomit. His desperation to save his pension, to maintain his facade of authority, despite his crumbling personal life, all of it was meaningless now. "But this isn't about me being her son," Marcus continued, his voice steady but charged with purpose. "Because Eleanor Mitchell shouldn't need a CEO son to be treated with respect. She shouldn't need connections or power or viral videos to receive basic human dignity at a bank where she's been a customer for 35 years. The damage was already viral. Carl Morrison, the security guard who'd removed his badge, whispered loud enough for nearby cameras to catch. "I tried to warn them, Mr. Mitchell. I knew something wasn't right. Your mother taught my nephew, Jerome. She deserves better than this." Marcus reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Thick, documented, damning. "This morning, our internal systems flagged something interesting. At 2:44 p.m., 3 minutes before my mother arrived, Ms. Sullivan accessed our high-risk profiles database. She searched for the name Mitchell. She was looking for a reason to deny service before my mother even walked through the door." The files proved everything. He held up his phone, showing a Slack message on the screen. "Mr. Thompson here sent Ms. Sullivan a message. Elderly black woman incoming. You know the drill? Document everything for fraud prevention." The crowd's collective understanding was palpable. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was systematic, premeditated, incentivized. The protesters outside pressed against the windows, watching the drama unfold. Someone started a Facebook Live from a different angle. The story was everywhere, inescapable, undeniable. "I've been watching from the beginning," Marcus revealed. "I wanted to see how far this would go. I wanted documented proof of what I've suspected, that despite my position, despite our supposed policies, Hamilton Federal still harbors and rewards discrimination." Board member Sheila Tran stepped forward from the crowd. "Marcus, the board needs to convene immediately. This is exactly what I warned about in our last 3 diversity meetings." Marcus interrupted. "This is what happens when we treat bias training as a checkbox instead of a transformation." Rebecca found her voice, weak and desperate. I didn't... Your last name. I didn't know." "That's exactly the problem, Ms. Sullivan. You didn't need to know who she was to treat her with respect. You didn't need to know she raised a CEO to acknowledge her humanity." The crowd would remember this moment, the way power shifted in real time, the way institutional authority transferred from the perpetrators to the victim, the way a son's love for his mother became a catalyst for systemic change. Marcus pulled out his phone and said 5 words that changed everything. "Convene all staff, right now." The main banking hall transformed into an amphitheater of accountability. Within 10 minutes, 300 employees had assembled: tellers, loan officers, executives, maintenance staff. They lined the marble balconies of the upper floors, packed the main floor, pressed against the glass walls. Marcus had invoked an emergency assembly protocol that hadn't been used in the bank's 150-year history. Every employee would be judged today. "I want everyone to see this," Marcus announced, his voice carrying through the PA system he'd activated from his phone. "I want you to look at the torn pieces of check on this floor. $75,000, destroyed not by accident, but by prejudice, by a system we've all participated in, actively or through silence." Rebecca Sullivan stood isolated near her teller station, her colleagues having unconsciously stepped away from her. Brad Thompson tried to edge toward the exit, but found it blocked by employees who'd heard about his role in the incident. The live streams continued. Jaden's had hit 1 million views, and dozens of others had started their own broadcasts. Marcus's words would change banking. "Ms. Sullivan," Marcus addressed her directly, his tone professional but ice-cold. "You cited fraud statistics. Would you share with everyone what demographics those statistics target?" Rebecca's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Her desperation to save her job, to pay her mortgage, to provide for her children, all of it had led her to become the very thing she'd once promised herself she'd never be. "I'll tell them," Marcus continued. "Zip codes 205, 2 all predominantly black neighborhoods, age ranges over 60, withdrawal amounts over $10,000. The algorithm doesn't say deny black customers, but it doesn't have to. The bias is built into the data." The evidence was undeniable. Eleanor stepped forward, and the crowd parted for her. She stood beside her son, but spoke with her own authority. The teacher who'd shaped thousands of lives, the widow who'd carried on despite loss, the mother who'd sacrificed everything for her children. "I don't want revenge," Eleanor said, her voice carrying the weight of dignity hard-won. "I want reform. No one should endure humiliation for the crime of existing while black. No one should have their humanity questioned because of the neighborhood they live in or the color of their skin." Eleanor's grace stunned everyone. Board member Stevens, an old guard executive who'd resisted every diversity initiative, tried to assert control. "Mr. Mitchell, your personal involvement here creates liability issues we can't ignore. The board will need to review. The board can review this." Marcus interrupted, pulling up his phone to show a real-time stock ticker. "We've lost $60 million in market value in the past hour. 3 major clients have already withdrawn their funds. The Maryland Banking Commission has announced an emergency investigation. The NAACP is mobilizing a national boycott." He turned to address Rebecca directly. "Ms. Sullivan, your employment is terminated for cause, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." "You can't just fire me without union review." Rebecca's voice cracked with desperation. "I have 15 years of perfect reviews. I was just following the training, the manual." "The manual you followed is discrimination disguised as protocol, and your 15 years of perfect reviews were built on how many vulnerable customers you turned away or humiliated." The terminations were just the beginning. Brad Thompson tried to salvage something. "I've been with this bank for 20 years. One mistake shouldn't—" "One mistake?" Marcus pulled up his phone again, showing internal communications. "I have 17 complaints against you for guiding tellers to be extra vigilant with certain customers. You created a culture of discrimination and called it fraud prevention. Your resignation will be on my desk within the hour, or I'll fire you for cause and ensure you never work in banking again." Rebecca's defense crumbled publicly. An employee in the crowd, someone from the lending department, suddenly spoke up. "I've seen this happen before. We all have. We just didn't speak up." The Johnsons were denied a mortgage last month despite perfect credit. The Washingtons were charged higher rates. It's everywhere. More voices joined in. The dam of silence broke. Stories poured out. Years of witnessed discrimination, of policies that targeted without explicitly saying so, of bonuses tied to metrics that rewarded bias. Marcus raised his hand for silence. Today, it ends. Every policy, every algorithm, every training manual will be reviewed. Every employee will undergo not just bias training, but a complete reconceptualization of what banking means in a diverse society. Outside, the crowd erupted in vindication. The protesters' chants of "Justice for Eleanor" mixed with "Change the system." News crews pushed closer, politicians gave impromptu speeches, and social media exploded with support and calls for industry-wide reform. Eleanor spoke once more, addressing not just the employees, but the cameras, the viewers, the nation watching. This moment isn't about one bank or one incident. It's about every institution that serves our communities. It's about choosing to see each other's humanity over our differences. It's about making dignity non-negotiable. The celebration was premature. Marcus wasn't done. "But terminating 2 employees isn't systemic change," Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the momentary relief. "What happened today is a symptom of a diseased system, and we're going to cure it completely." But Marcus wasn't done. He had one more announcement that would shake the industry. Marcus Mitchell stood at the center of his bank's marble hall, 300 employees watching, cameras broadcasting to millions. The torn check pieces still lay scattered on the floor, evidence of what was about to become a watershed moment in American banking. "Effective immediately," Marcus announced, his voice resonating with conviction. "Hamilton Federal implements the Eleanor Mitchell Protocols, comprehensive reform that will revolutionize how we serve every customer." The reforms would reshape everything. He pulled up a presentation on his phone, mirroring it to the bank's digital displays. The first slide showed a photograph of the torn check. The second showed his mother standing dignified amid chaos. The third showed a new future. First, mandatory bias intervention training designed by the Southern Poverty Law Center, not some corporate checkbox exercise. Every employee, from janitors to board members, will complete 40 hours of intensive training. No exceptions. A regional VP in the crowd protested. "These reforms will cost us millions in implementation alone. The board won't approve." "The board already has," Marcus responded, showing his phone with unanimous written consent from board members, obtained in the past 20 minutes. "The cost of discrimination is bankruptcy, moral and financial. We're hemorrhaging money as we speak. This isn't charity, it's survival." Eleanor's new role shocked the industry. "Second," Marcus continued, "I'm appointing Eleanor Mitchell as Hamilton Federal's first Chief Dignity Officer. She'll have veto power over any policy or practice that discriminates against vulnerable populations. Her salary will be paid from the executive bonus pool, starting with mine." Eleanor hadn't known about this. She stood straighter, understanding that her humiliation was being transformed into institutional power. The teacher who'd shaped thousands of young minds would now reshape a financial institution. Third, we're establishing community oversight boards with real power, not advisory roles. Members will be drawn from the neighborhoods we've historically underserved. They'll review our lending practices, our customer service protocols, our hiring decisions. The community finally had power. Tony Chen, who'd closed his accounts earlier, stepped forward. "Will this board have actual teeth, or is this just PR?" They'll have the power to freeze any executive decision pending review. They'll have access to all our data, all our communications. Full transparency. Board member Sheila Tran added her voice. I'm personally committing $5 million to establish a discrimination victim fund. Anyone who can document discrimination at Hamilton Federal in the past 10 years will be compensated. I'll match that, Mrs. Hampton Wells announced. And the Hampton Wells Foundation will add another $10 million. The fund would grow beyond millions. Marcus wasn't finished. Fourth, we're eliminating all algorithms and metrics that use zip codes, age, or names as risk factors. Credit decisions will be based on financial history only, reviewed by diverse panels, with AI systems trained on equitable data sets. A young black employee, Jasmine, who'd been taking notes throughout, raised her hand. What about other banks? This changes Hamilton Federal, but what about the industry? Other banks scrambled to respond. Marcus smiled, the first time since entering the building. I'm calling a summit of the 50 largest bank CEOs in America. We're sharing our new protocols freely. Any bank that doesn't adopt similar measures within 6 months will face a coordinated response from civil rights organizations, with Hamilton Federal leading the charge. The challenge reverberated through the financial world. Within minutes, Twitter lit up with responses from other banks. Some pledged immediate reform. Others remained silent, calculating the cost of change versus the cost of resistance. Fifth, Marcus announced, promotion and bonuses will now include dignity metrics. You'll be evaluated not just on revenue, but on how you treat every customer. Hidden shoppers from diverse backgrounds will test our service. Discrimination will result in immediate termination. The volunteers would become leaders. Employees began stepping forward, volunteering to lead change initiatives. The same people who'd remained silent for years suddenly found their voices. Michelle, Rebecca's former colleague, volunteered to head bias training. Carl, who'd removed his security badge, offered to lead community outreach. Eleanor spoke again, her teacher's voice commanding attention. Change doesn't come from policies alone. It comes from people choosing to see each other's humanity. Every person who walks through those doors carries a story, carries dreams, carries dignity. Our job is to honor that. History would remember this day. The regional VP who'd protested earlier made one more attempt. Mr. Mitchell, we need to consider shareholder value. Shareholder value? Marcus's controlled fury returned. We've lost $100 million in market cap today. Major clients are fleeing. We're facing federal investigation. You want to talk about value? The value is in becoming a bank that serves all Americans, not just the ones who look like the founders' portraits on our walls. He gestured to the painted portraits of Hamilton Federal's founding fathers, all white, all male, all dead. Those portraits are coming down. They'll be replaced with photos of our customers, our communities, the America we actually serve. A custodian who'd been watching from the back called out, I've cleaned this bank for 15 years. First time I've felt like I belong here. Marcus nodded to him. You've always belonged here. We just forgot that banks are made of people, not marble and brass. The moment crystallized into something larger than one incident, one bank, one mother and son. It became a reckoning, transmitted live to millions, studied in business schools, cited in civil rights cases. History would remember this day. 6 months later, something remarkable happened that no one expected. 6 months after the Hamilton Federal Revolution, Eleanor Mitchell sat in her office on the 3rd floor, the same floor where loan officers had once denied her husband's business dreams. The walls now displayed photos from Jefferson High, her students at graduation, the debate team she'd coached to nationals, the reading garden she'd created from an abandoned lot. The space smelled of fresh coffee and the lavender plant Jasmine had given her. For peace in battle, the young woman had said. Jasmine would transform the industry. The promotion ceremony that morning had been small but significant. Jasmine Williams, no relation to Jaden the live streamer, stood before the executive team as Marcus announced her appointment as Vice President of Equitable Banking Initiatives. At 28, she was the youngest VP in Hamilton Federal's history, and the first to rise from teller to executive in under 3 years. Mrs. Mitchell taught me that dignity isn't given. It's recognized, Jasmine said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. We just needed to open our eyes. She helped me see that banking isn't about protecting money from people. It's about connecting money to dreams. Carl's courage inspired hundreds. Carl Morrison had returned to Hamilton Federal, but not as a security guard. He now led the Community Ambassador program, teaching employees about the neighborhoods they served. His tour that afternoon included the corner store where Mrs. Chen had started her empire with a $500 loan, the church where financial literacy classes now used Hamilton Federal's new transparent fee structures as positive examples. I knew it was wrong, Carl told the group of new hires. After 30 years, I finally found my voice. Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. But more than that, thank you for showing us we all had voices. We just needed permission to use them. Eleanor's impact was just beginning. In the break room, conversations had changed. Where once employees had whispered about customers' appearances or questioned withdrawal amounts, they now shared success stories. Malcolm from lending had helped the Gonzalez family buy their first home with the new equitable rates. Sarah from customer service had connected an elderly veteran with benefits he hadn't known existed. Every person who walks through those doors carries a story, Eleanor reminded them during the weekly dignity rounds she conducted. Our job is to honor it. Mr. Patterson isn't just account number 5847293. He's a man who worked 3 jobs to put his kids through college. Ms. Liu isn't a risk profile. She's building a bakery that will employ 15 people. Customer stories went nationwide. The Washington Post ran a series. After the Tears, How One Torn Check Reformed American Banking. The stories poured in. A black farmer in Georgia finally got the loan to save his family's land. An immigrant family in Texas opened their first account without being asked for papers they didn't need. An elderly woman in Oregon received an apology and restitution for discrimination she'd faced a decade ago. Eleanor's daughter, Angela, sat in the sunny chemotherapy suite at Johns Hopkins, her treatment fully funded, reading these stories aloud to other patients. My mama did that, she'd say with quiet pride. She stood up, and everything changed. Recovery came from unexpected sources. The most surprising story came from Rebecca Sullivan. She'd sent a letter to Eleanor through the bank's lawyers. Handwritten, 6 pages, tear-stained. She was working at a food bank now, serving the very communities she'd once viewed through the lens of suspicious statistics. I spent 15 years thinking I was protecting the bank, Rebecca wrote. I was just protecting my prejudice. My children ask why I lost my job, and I tell them the truth. I forgot that every person deserves respect. Mrs. Mitchell, you could have destroyed me. Instead, your dignity in that moment destroyed something worse, my blindness to my own bias. Former manager Brad had also written, his resignation letter public and unflinching. I failed as a leader. I saw discrimination and called it protocol. I prioritized my pension over people's dignity. I'm in therapy now, learning how fear of my own failures made me cruel to others. Their moment would inspire millions. Marcus and Eleanor stood in the memorial garden behind the bank, a space created where the executive parking lot had been. The plaque read, James Mitchell Memorial Garden, where dreams take root. They planted a cherry tree together, its roots reaching deep into Baltimore soil. Dad would be proud, Marcus said quietly. He always was, Eleanor replied, touching the watch she still wore daily. He just wanted the world to see what he saw. That dignity isn't negotiable. It's fundamental. the celebration revealed something more. The evening celebration wasn't grand, just employees and community members sharing food from local restaurants the bank now supported. But something had shifted. The marble didn't feel cold anymore. The brass fixtures didn't intimidate. Hamilton Federal had become what banks should be, a place where communities build futures. The real test came when someone unexpected walked through the door. 1 year later, the autumn sun streamed through Hamilton Federal's windows, illuminating the new installation in the main hall, the torn check pieces preserved under glass, mounted where the founders' portraits once hung. The plaque beneath read simply, "The check that changed everything, October 15th, 2024. The plaque would stand forever. Eleanor Mitchell stood before a crowd of banking executives from across the nation, her voice carrying the same quiet authority that had commanded classrooms and now commanded boardrooms. She wore her husband's watch, now scratched from daily wear, but still keeping perfect time. "Change isn't about tearing down those who wrong us," Eleanor said, addressing the 3rd annual Dignity in Banking Summit. "It's about building systems where wronging each other becomes impossible, where bias can't hide behind algorithms, where prejudice can't masquerade as protocol." Every bank would follow suit. The statistics Marcus presented were staggering. 347 banks had adopted versions of the Eleanor Mitchell protocols. Discriminatory lending practices had dropped 73% industry-wide. Hamilton Federal, once hemorrhaging money and trust, had become the fastest-growing bank in the Mid-Atlantic, with customer satisfaction scores that made competitors weep. Redemption takes time and work. Rebecca Sullivan attended the summit as a guest speaker, representing the National Association for Restorative Justice in Banking. She'd spent the year not just apologizing, but actively working to dismantle the systems she'd once enforced. Her presentation on unconscious bias training had made grown executives cry. "Mrs. Mitchell taught me to see people, not profiles," Rebecca said, her voice steady now. "I'm earning that lesson every day." Eleanor's words would echo globally. The final speaker surprised everyone. Jaden Williams, the live streamer whose video had catalyzed everything. Now Hamilton Federal's Director of Digital Equity, he'd transformed from influencer to advocate, using social media to spotlight financial discrimination nationwide. "Real-life stories matter," Jaden said. "Black stories matter. Life stories of struggle and dignity matter. These aren't just touching stories for viral moments, they're calls to action." Marcus took the podium for the closing remarks, his CEO authority now tempered with hard-won wisdom. "My mother taught me that true power isn't in commanding respect, it's in ensuring everyone receives it. Today, I ask each of you, what check will you refuse to tear? What dignity will you defend? What change will you champion?" Your story starts now. Eleanor concluded with a direct challenge to everyone watching, in person and the millions streaming online. Have you witnessed discrimination at your bank? Your voice matters. Share your story. Demand your dignity. Change starts with one person standing up. Today, that person could be you. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but the real change would last generations.